Hi, welcome to the Essential Ingredient in Paran. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own gingerbread house from scratch. And from everyone at the Essential Ingredient, we'd just like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a safe New Year. We'll start by creaming our butter and sugar. So I've got some softened butter in the bowl, and you can either use brown sugar or muscovado sugar. So we'll cream this till it's light and fluffy. You may want to stop halfway through and just scrape down your sides a little bit, just to make sure that you get everything incorporated. I'll just give that another few minutes. Now we're going to scrape the sides down again, and we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla paste, to our mix. Put that down, and just turning on low, we're going to add our eggs just one at a time, slowly till they incorporate. And then I'll add the other one. Once those are in, I'm going to add my molasses. So you can put all of that in. And then we're just going to slowly mix that through. And so once that's all incorporated, we have our flour, and I've got some cinnamon and white pepper in there. I'm going to add my ground ginger, my ground cloves, and I have some bicarb and baking powder in there. So all of that's going to go in. Just give it a bit of a mix, and then we're going to sieve it. So not only does this get any lumps or impurities out, but it also distributes your spices evenly through the flour. And we're almost there. You can see there's still a few sort of lumps of spices that we need to get through. Also your bicarb and your baking powder tends to lump together, and you want to distribute that evenly so that you've got an even rise in your gingerbread. Okay, so now I'm just going to put this on low, and I'm just going to gently start spooning flour into my mix. So once we've added about half, now we're just going to fold through the rest of our flour. So I'm just going to add a few at a time. And we're gently going to fold it in. So you don't want to overwork this too much, because otherwise your gingerbread tends to get a little tough because you've overworked the gluten in it. It'll be quite soft too, so it will need to go in the fridge for a couple of hours once you've incorporated everything together. going to just wrap this up in 2 parts in Glad wrap. So you can see that it's quite soft. So we do need this to set. So I'm just going to wrap it up in some Glad wrap. Make it a little bit flat. So the reason we put it into 2 lots is because we don't want to be rolling out one big whole sheet at a time. If it gets too warm, then it's hard to roll. So we want to try and keep it into small batches. So I'm going to pop these in the fridge for a minimum of 2 hours. You can prepare this the day before as well and have it in the fridge up to 3 to 4 days before you need it. So we have attached for you to this video a template for your house and also some little templates for some Christmas trees to go next to your house as well. Okay, so my oven is preheated at 180 degrees. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out our gingerbread dough and we're going to do it on greaseproof paper. Because what we want to do is we're going to roll it out into one big sheet, then we're going to pop it in the fridge and let it set again so that when we cut it out we get nice, straight, definite lines for our house. So plenty of flour because it is still quite soft, as you can see. And you don't want to be playing around with it too much because you don't want it to get too warm. So I'll just start by rolling it out. So you want to roll it out to about 1.5 mil. Okay, and it is easy to obviously roll it out on your baking paper rather than trying to lift this whole sheet onto your baking paper. So the wall, so you're going to have, you've got 2 parts to it, so your walls and your roof, and the front can be a little bit thicker, so about 1.5 mils, but your chimney and your door probably want to be just a little bit thinner, so maybe 1 mil, and this just makes it easier too to roll it out to the right consistency. Okay. So that looks pretty good. So all we need to do now, making sure that it's even, then all we need to do now is we're going to slide our baking paper straight onto the tray. And I'm going to pop this in the fridge for maybe 10 minutes at the most, just to let it cool down. Okay, so this has been sitting in the fridge for about 10 minutes. So what we're going to do now, because it's nice and cold and firm, we're going to start cutting out our template. So leaving it on the tray, on the baking paper, you're just gently going to cut around your template. And it will be quite easy because it is nice and firm. And you'll notice that it holds its shape quite well too. And this one's a little bit tricky, obviously, that we don't have too much of a straight line. So we need 2 sides to this. So the second one will be the back. So we might pop that one in there. So we don't need to cut the door out of this one. Okay, so the next one we'll do is our side walls. So again, we're going to need 2 of these. Okay, and then our roof. And 2 of these. So now you want to just remove the excess. You can keep that later to to make some extra cookies. So just be gentle because you don't want to wreck what you've just cut. So just give it a little tap to keep it nice and straight. You can use a palette knife, and what we'll do is we'll just give it a little bit of space on the tray to bake. They won't spread too much, but they will a little bit. And then you can always trim them up a little bit after they're cooked if you've got some edges that are a little bit shabby. Okay, so I'm going to pop these straight in the oven now for about 12 to 15 minutes. And they can cook while we're cutting out the smaller pieces. Okay, so we've got our second round of gingerbread. So we're going to do our trees and our chimneys. We've already done our door. So each tree needs 3 sides. Your chimney, we're going to need 2 of each. And you can even it up a little bit before it goes in. So what I'm going to do is I'll cut all those 3 out, and then we'll do the same thing. We'll pop it straight into the oven at 180 degrees for 12 to 15 minutes. Okay, so now I've got all my pieces cooked, and what we'll do is allow them to cool completely. Probably best if you can leave them overnight. So just wrap them in some Glad wrap and put them in an airtight container. And once they're completely cooled, then we can start assembling our gingerbread house. Okay, so the first thing we need to do once we've had our gingerbread cool is we've got to trim it off. So as you can see, when you bake it, you still get these rounded edges on your gingerbread. So what we need to do is we're going to cut it off so that we've got a nice straight edge, so that makes it easier to assemble and stick together. So using a serrated edge knife, just on the very edge of your gingerbread, you probably won't need to cut off too much. You just gently, backwards and forwards, because you don't want to crack. You just want to take off a small amount, just so that you've got a nice straight edge. So you'll do that with all your pieces. Okay, some of these you might not need to take off too much. Others you might need to take off a little bit more. So these ones, as you can see, I'm really just shaving the edge off. Okay. And then for your chimney, you've got this little bit that sits on the roof. So this one, you need to just gently shave that off, just like that. So I'm pushing the knife in and just gently pushing down just to get that nice straight edge. Okay, so with our door, we do want, it's not going to fit obviously in, it's going to, when we assemble it, it's going to look like the door's open. So we want to maybe just take the edge off one side so that that sticks easy enough to the house. But we want to keep the rounded edge on the other side just for an effect. And then the other little things that we have too is our little trees. So we just want to put a tiny little bit of an edge on these, not so much and more on the base more than anything, just so that they sit flat. Okay, so once you've done all of those, you also want to select a board that is for the appropriate size of your house. So nothing too small and obviously nothing too massive unless you're going to create a big effect around the house. And then once you've decided what pattern you're going to do on your house, then we will start with the royal icing to start decorating. Okay, so we're going to make our royal icing now for our decoration. So I have 3 egg whites which are going to go into our mixer. We're just going to whisk those up just till they're a little bit fluffy. You just want to break up the egg white a little bit. So then I have 600 grams of icing sugar, so pure icing sugar, not the icing sugar mixture. Icing sugar mixture tends to have other things through it, corn flour and that sort of thing, so you want to try and use the pure icing sugar when you're making royal icing. So I'm just going to put a couple of spoons in here and then blend it just on low. And as it keeps mixing through, I'm just going to keep adding my sugar. Okay, now that that's all incorporated, we're going to add a teaspoon of lemon juice, a teaspoon of liquid glucose. So this will just help stop anything crystallising. It just stabilises it a little bit. So I'll pop some of that, a teaspoon of that in, and then just mix that together. Okay, so we've got a nice spreadable paste. It's like a really, really firm meringue. And now I'm going to pop that aside until we need it. Really important that you pop a layer of Glad wrap over it, so touching the surface, because you don't want it to start drying out and going crusty. So there we go. You just want to make sure that you don't get any air in it. So you can prepare this up to an hour or so before if you need to, but just make sure that it's airtight, otherwise it will start to dry out. So it's entirely up to you how you wish to decorate your gingerbread house. So you can, I'm using some fondant, and I'm also using my royal icing. I'm using a little bit of colour and some silver balls. So I've got some powdered colour here, which I'm going to use for my wreath on the front door. And I will probably use a little bit of pearl sugar, which is here, and that just as decorations on the trees. You can do whatever you like. If you've got your kids doing it with you, obviously they might want jelly beans and licorice and all that sort of thing on there as well. So if you're using fondant, which this comes already made, so you don't need to make it. Again, it comes in plastic so it doesn't dry out. You don't want to roll it all out at once, otherwise it will dry out and become hard to roll and control. So I'm just going to cut that one in half. This is just a plain vanilla white. Keep that bit wrapped up. And then using corn flour, we're just going to roll this out onto the bench. So use corn flour rather than icing sugar, otherwise it tends to get a little bit sticky on your hands, because this is just pure sugar. So a little bit of corn flour. And I'm just going to roll it out. You don't want it too thick, maybe 1 or 2 mil. Just also depending on how big your house is too, because you want everything sort of in proportion. So I'm going to put fondant on the roof. I'm going to use that as my tiles. So I don't want it too thick. And I'm going to use a little bit of fondant just for my windows. Again, if you wish to just pipe it with royal icing, you can do that as well. And just a little bit more. Okay. Also make sure your bench is nice and clean so that it keeps everything nice and white. Make sure you don't have any offcuts of gingerbread anywhere, otherwise they get stuck in and then you end up with spotty bits through your icing. Okay, so I've rolled that out to just sort of a couple of mil there. So it is important to decide what sort of design you're going to do so you know exactly how many pieces of everything you need to cut out. So I'm going to do one window on each side. So I've got a small square cutter that I'm going to make 4 little panels for each window. So I'll cut out 8 and then just pop them onto a floured board. I'll do a couple of extra just in case. Don't want to get halfway through decorating and have to do all this again. So I'm going to do a little round window at the front, but I also want to cut another round because this is going to be a little template for my wreath. Okay, now for my roof, I've just used a larger cutter, and I'm going to just cut out what I need for that. Okay, and I'm just going to do a couple of little stars to pop on top of my tree. Okay, and then you can just fold this up and keep that in plastic so that it doesn't dry out for the next time. Okay, so I'm going to start with the roof. So I've just put a little bit of icing in a bowl just to make it a little bit easier. So with a little spatula, I'm going to spread some royal icing. So it is easier to decorate the sides of your house, obviously, before you put it all together. And then we can assemble it once you've decorated it as you wish. So I'm just putting a thin layer of royal icing on my roof. And then I'm going to stick my little tiles on them. So I'm going 3 down, so they will overlap just a little bit. So I'm going to save room down here because we're going to put a little bit of drippy snow. So we just overlap like that. Once it's on the royal icing, it will stick. So once you're sure where it is, then you can put a little bit of pressure on it. Then once it sets, that'll be it. Okay, and then I'll finish the other one exactly the same. Okay, so that's my roof done. So what I've done is I've mirrored each end so that when that goat sits on the house, it faces the same way. So what we've got now is our side walls, and I'm going to pop our little windows on there. So tiny little bit of icing. And just pop them on wherever you... So the icing now, this royal icing is starting to firm up a little bit, which is good because it just makes it easier to handle. You're not squashing it or putting it out of shape. Like I said, just using small quantities of royal icing at a time. Otherwise it will dry out and you'll just end up wasting it. So we've got the front door and that's the back of the house. What I'm going to do with this one, so this is going to be a round window. We're going to cut this into 4. And that's going to go at the back of the house. There we go. So this won't take very long to set, but you want to make sure that this is all set before you continue on with any other decorating. And then the front, I'm just going to sit that there. I'm not going to stick it on because that's where my wreath is going to go. And this is just a guide as to getting the perfect circle for my wreath, which is going just above the door. But I am going to put a little window at the top, so I'm going to use the bigger circle and again cut it into 4. So it is a little bit fiddly, as you can see, but it is worth it in the end if you've got the time. Okay. There we go. And now we can start our piping. Okay, so if you wish to frame your work with a little bit of piping, so I've just popped some royal icing into a piping bag and I've just chopped the tip off the end so it's nice and fine. So what you need to do when piping is, rather than trying to write like you would with a pen, you're literally placing the icing onto the actual surface. So you can do whatever patterns come to you. Okay, so I've done a little bit of piping work, not too much. I'm going to keep this fairly simple. What we'll do now though, I'm going to show you the wreath. So we're going to colour some icing sugar. So just take a little bit of your pre-prepared icing sugar and pop it in a bowl. You don't need that much. And then we're going to add some colouring to it. So I'm using powdered oil-soluble colouring just because I find this is really effective for this sort of thing. It's not going to alter the state of your icing at all, and it just gives it a really subtle colour. So I'm just going to put it maybe 1/4 teaspoon, and we're just going to mix that through. So it's not an intense colour at all, it is actually quite subtle and easier to control too than your liquid colourings, which are good for other things. But if you're just wanting something gradual, then the powdered is really good. So we'll just mix that up, and then I'm going to put that into a piping bag. So what I've done is just cut the tip off a disposable piping bag and got a small nozzle there. And the icing's going to go into there. So you just want to make sure you make up enough so that you've got enough to pipe. Okay, so what we're going to do is, this is not stuck, this is just a guide. So we're just going to pipe little and just make a little circle. With our icing. So not pushing too hard. So as you pipe, you want to lift up, just creates a little peak, gives it a bit more of a 3D effect. Okay. Doesn't need to be perfect. As you know, wreaths are made, they're not perfect. So that's the green, and now we're going to make the red. So again, the same thing. So you see the red is beautiful, it's quite brilliant looking. Again, just add a little bit to start. And these are obviously for holly berries. So I'm just going to add just a little bit more, just to give it a bit more of a kick. And once that's all mixed in nicely, you're going to again pop that into a piping bag with a small nozzle. You need to, you just pop a little bit on there just to let it come through, and just going to pop a few. It seems like it sometimes feels like you're wasting a lot because you're not using very much, but you do need a certain amount in the piping bag for it to work. So I'm just popping a few little red berries. And then I'm going to take my little silver balls. So these, you just take a few out, pop them on your hand, and then we're just going to place them on here while it's still wet so that they will stick. There we go. You can always pop a few more on later. And then I'm going to let that set before I take my little disc out and see our little wreath. So once all that's set, we're then going to proceed with sticking it all together. Okay, so now we've got our board ready to go. So what I've done is I've just marked out where we're going to sit our pieces of gingerbread so that I know exactly where I'm going to pipe my icing so that it sticks. So I've got a larger nozzle now. What I'm going to do is just pipe a straight line. It can be generous, you can clean it up later, so don't stress if you think there's too much icing on there. And I'm going to pipe down to the other side. So that I'm taking the back end of my house and I'm going to pop it straight in there. And the other part of the house there. And then what you want to do while you're holding it there straight, you're going to pipe straight up. And then gently, you're going to turn it around and we're going to pipe up the seal. So we're just basically sealing up all our little cracks. So holding it stable, pipe straight up here again. You can be a little more generous on the inside if you want to, because you're not going to see that. So then the next step, just want to make sure when you're looking down on it that it's nice and straight. So then the other side, we're going to do the other wall now. There we go. So again, I just want to make sure we pipe up the side. And then again on the inside. Now it's going to be a little bit difficult to do this with the others. And then our front is going to go on there. So what you want to make sure before it sets that it's nice and straight, because you can still move it, as you can see, easily. So I'm going to pipe along here. And there goes the front of the house. So now I'm going to pipe up the side and then up the other side. So you want to try and get it as straight as you can. So you want to move quite quickly, sort of more efficiently. There you go. And I'm just going to go up the inside here just to make sure that we've sealed it properly. There we go. So that's the first part. So before we put the roof on, we really need to make sure that this dries first. So it won't take very long to dry. So give it probably at least a good 10 to 20 minutes first before proceeding with the roof. So we've got this set now. We're going to pop our roof on. So what we need to do is plenty of icing, run that along the top. And then we need to run it down this part. So we take one roof. So you want it so that the tiles are going downwards. So this is a little bit heavier than the rest of them, obviously, because it's got the fondant on it. So you want to be able to hold it for a little bit, just till it sticks. You don't want it sliding off. And just squeeze it a little bit together. Okay, then we're going to go up the other side. Again, just gently placing this one on top, making sure it's all lined up. Just holding it in position. And then what I'm going to do while I'm holding that is pipe some more icing down the centre. Okay, and then we want to let this set before we do anything else. Okay, so we're going to leave this just for another 20 minutes and come back and finish the rest off. Okay, so here's the roof on now, nice and secure, and now we're going to put our chimney on. So we've got our little pieces that we've pre-cut, so we're just going to pipe and you can pop your chimney wherever you like, and then we'll build the other side up. So that is a slightly shorter because it's just going to sit on top of the tiles, and we can clean that up in a minute. And we'll pop the other side on. And in the front, I'm going to pop that and a little bit on the bottom just to make it secure. So it's a nice little square. So what we can actually do is with a knife, you can just run it up the side of the join so that you don't have too much icing. Because what we're going to do is we'll pop a little bit on top, because obviously that's where the snow falls, and then we'll decorate that. And just make sure it's square and secure. And I'm going to pipe some icing on top. Just a little bit so it dribbles over the edge too. And then with your pearl sugar, it's a little bit tricky, I'm just going to pop a little bit on top. Just to add to your little snow effect. If it falls inside, that's okay. But you don't want to squash your icing either too much, because it should be all nice puffy, powder puff snow. And then just to cover this little bit up here, I'm going to pipe just a little bit like this, just for a bit of a effect. In the middle, and then I'm going to pop again. And that just sort of covers up any of the little seals, adds to the effect. There we go. And we'll just let that set for a minute. So if you want to create that drippy effect, what we need to do is you have to pipe it up and down and then sort of pull it. And what that does is it just creates, if it's not perfect, that's okay, because it's snow, it doesn't fall perfectly. Don't do too many, just do enough just to give it, what you want to do is cover up those seals, the joins, and this just takes practice. So if you've got any extra gingerbread offcuts, you probably want to practice on that first. But worst comes to worst, you can always scrape it off and cover it up again. So that's, you can probably, I can tilt it up a little bit. You can see there. And that's the house done. So to attach the door, so again, round down the join. And on the bottom, just so it doesn't go anywhere. then pop a bit of icing around the bottom, just so it looks like there's a bit of snow. There. Okay, so the last and final thing that we're going to do is put our trees together. So what you need to do is you've got your 3 triangles that are the same size, and we're just going to pipe along the side like that on the same side of each one. And then just bring them together, all 3 pieces. Okay, so we're going to do this first before we do anything else. So you just want to let that set into place, and just tidy that up a little bit, take a little bit of that off, because we are going to add more, because we want to put our little baubles on there and our icing sugar. So we'll just let those set for a few minutes before we finish them off. Okay, so this is the final part. We're going to finish off our trees. So what I have here is just some little silver baubles to decorate. So you can put anything you like on them. And also the little stars from previously that we cut out. And I've got snow sugar. So snow sugar looks a little bit like icing sugar, but it's probably just a little more synthetic, I guess. It's dextrose, starch, and hydrogenated vegetable fat. So what happens is this all mixed together becomes what looks like a bit like a funny sort of powder. It doesn't dissolve, so it's perfect for decorating cakes. Okay, so what we want to do is, I've got a fair amount of little balls there, so I'm going to pipe down the seam of my tree and just pop it in the balls there like that. So it creates like little lights, little sort of sparkly fairy lights. So again, pipe down the seam. Okay, and then the last one, so just be careful holding it. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our snow sugar in our shaker, and I'm just going to go on the top part of the tree. And on the other side. And then I'm going to pop a little bit of icing sugar on the on the bottom of the tree, and I'm going to place it on my board wherever you wish to have them. And then I'm going to pop a little bit more icing on top and pop our little star on top of there. Okay. Icing on the bottom, a little bit of snow sugar, star on top.